Modern Dental Assisting Chapter 23, Chemical and Waste Management. In this chapter, we're going to talk about hazards and exposures that we can have in the dental office. As a dental assistant, we're exposed to a wide variety of chemicals that are used for procedures, cleaning our instruments, disinfecting and sterilization. We use chemicals in the lab and then also with x-ray processing. So when we're using these chemicals, we're putting our heart, kidney, liver, and lung at risk. Results of exposure range from our short-term discomfort, so this can be like our burns and our rashes, to life-threatening conditions, including cancer and organ failure. A hazardous chemical is defined as any chemical that could cause a physical or health hazard. So a chemical is considered hazardous if it can catch fire, if it can react or explode when mixed with other substances, if the chemical is corrosive, or if it's toxic. There are three primary methods of exposure. This includes inhalation, skin contact, and ingestion. Gases, vapors, and dust of chemicals can cause direct damage to the lungs. Acute and chronic chemical toxicity. So with our acute toxicity, this results from a high level of exposure that happens over a shorter amount of time. Chronic chemical toxicity results from many smaller repeated exposures, and this happens over a longer term, so months or years. When we're using chemical disinfectants, we should always be wearing our utility gloves, not our latex gloves that we would wear during patient care. Serious damage to eyes, even blindness, can result from chemical accidents. So we always want to make sure that we're protecting our eyes with goggles or with a face shield. And then we want to make sure that we're using the proper PPE. So we should have safety data sheets for every chemical in the office. In the safety data sheet, it should spell out and let you know exactly what personal protective equipment is needed when handling the chemical. To protect against accidental inhalation, we should be wearing our mask. You want to make sure that your mask can repel fluid and should provide respiratory protection. Accidents and spills should not be a common occurrence. Planning and practice in dealing with such spills should minimize employee exposure to harmful chemicals. So we're going to always refer back to those SDS sheets for what we should do if there was a spill and how to manage it. A mercury spill kit should be available in all dental offices where we're using amalgam. Exposure to even small amounts of mercury is very hazardous to the health of the dental personnel. Mercury can be absorbed through the skin or through inhalation of mercury vapors. Eye wash units are a requirement of OSHA. They should be in every place of employment in which chemicals are used. When turned on, the eye wash unit will irrigate the eyes with a soft but wide flow of water necessary to bathe away contaminants without causing any additional damage. As an employee, you should be trained in the proper use of the eye wash station. And also, we want to make sure that we're regularly inspecting the eye wash unit every 3 months to ensure that it is ready to go and functional. Good ventilation is necessary when dealing with any type of chemical. Many dental offices are equipped with special exhaust systems in the lab and sterilization, and then also in the dark room area for the fumes and the dust that accumulate. Some of the general precautions for storing chemicals include basic safe policy is to store the medications and chemicals in a dry and cool, dark place. They should not be exposed to direct sunlight. We're always going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Avoid exposure to light. We will check the expiration date and rotate inventory according to the expiration date. Empty containers can hold a residue, so we want to make sure that we're removing them. We're not going to fill empty containers with another substance because it's dangerous. And we'll follow and label the SDS for guidance in disposing of empty containers. Classification of waste. So we have general waste. This is all non-hazardous, non-regulated waste that should be discarded in covered containers. Then we have our hazardous waste. This is waste that can ignite, is corrosive, is reactive, toxic, or listed by the EPA. Contaminated waste is going to be the waste that contacts blood or other bodily fluids. And then infectious or regulated waste is contaminated waste capable of transmitting an infectious disease. Handling contaminated waste. So this should be placed in a lined trash reciprocal. The reciprocal should have a properly fitted lid, and it should be emptied once a day or more if it's full. Infectious or regulated waste should never be disposed in our general waste. In the dental office, we will see blood or blood-soaked materials, pathologic waste, and then also our sharps. Containers must be labeled with the universal biohazard symbol, and sharps have to go in a specialized sharps container. Dispose of extracted teeth as regulated medical waste unless being returned to the patient. When teeth are returned to the patient, the provisions of the standard no longer apply. Do not dispose of extracted teeth containing amalgam in our regulated medical waste because it is incinerated. Because of the mercury in the amalgam fillings, you should check with the state and local authorities for regulations regarding the disposal of teeth that have amalgam. Hazardous waste may include toxic chemicals, extracted teeth with amalgam restorations, or other toxic waste. We should dispose in accordance with the local and state regulations. Once contaminated waste leaves the office, it is regulated by the EPA and by state and local laws. Under most regulations, the manner of disposal is determined by the amount or the weight of infectious material requiring disposal. The average dental practice is categorized as a smaller producer of infectious waste, and disposal is regulated accordingly. The law requires that the dentist maintain records of final disposal of medical waste, including documentation of how, when, and where. OSHA issued the hazard communication standard because employees have the right to know the identity of hazards of chemicals that they're using in the workplace. This is also known as the employee right to know law, and this requires employers to implement a hazard communication program. Major changes to the hazard communication standard include hazard classification. So chemicals are classified into categories that compare hazard severity within a hazard class. Each chemical that falls into the same category has the same label requirements and language. All labels will include a harmonized signal word pictogram and hazard statement for each class and category. And then our safety data sheets now have a specified 16 section format. For our chemical inventory, we should have a comprehensive list of every product that's used in the office. When we have a new product come in that contains a hazardous chemical, we should add this to the inventory. We have to make sure that we have the SDS sheet and it is provided. The manufacturer or distributor should provide an SDS sheet. If they do not, you typically find them online. SDS contain health and safety information about every chemical in the office. They provide a comprehensive technical information and a resource for employees working with that chemical. And they also describe the physical and chemical properties of the chemical, health hazards, routes of exposure, precautions for safe handling and use, emergency and first aid procedures, and then spill control measures. Containers should be labeled to indicate what chemical they contain and then any hazards. There's no official labeling system, but there are many approaches. The two most important considerations are that the labeling system include all required information and that the employees are trained to read those labels. The National Fire Protection Association has a labeling system that is frequently used. This system involves the four diamonds, the blue, red, yellow, and white, that are filled then with ratings 0 to 4. Categories of health hazard is our blue, flammability is red, reactivity is yellow, and then special hazard symbols such as OXY or oxidizers in white. Exemptions to our requirements are certain chemicals like tobacco products, wood products, food, drugs, cosmetics. These are exempt. Dental offices use some substances that may be regulated under federal, state, or local environmental regulation. These materials may affect the wastewater treatment plant or may bypass the treatment plant in the bay, ocean, river, or other waters. Many states require dental offices to have specific types of waste hauled away by a licensed carrier. Next, we'll talk about sharps. OSHA, the Center for Disease Control Prevention, or CDC, and the EPA classify sharps as infectious waste. According to OSHA, disposable sharps can be placed in a closable, leak-proof, puncture-resistant container immediately after they are used. The container must be labeled with a biohazard symbol and color-coded for easy identification. State regulators differ regarding how frequently sharp containers must be picked up. Pharmaceutical waste must be separated and collected for disposal, and it needs to be in a container that's leak-proof, has a tight-fitting lid, should be labeled, and is collected by a medical waste company. Scrap amalgam should be collected and stored in a designated dry and airtight container. Photochemical waste. So our fixer has a on-site treatment requires installation of silver recovery systems. Off-site treatment involves storing that fixer or the used fixer and contracting with a disposal company, and they'll come and pick it up. And then our developer products with a high or low pH are likely to be considered hazardous waste and should be managed according to your local regulations. Lead foil is easily recyclable but cannot be disposed in the garbage. This is exempt from regulation as a hazardous waste when it's recycled as scrap metal. Small quantities of spent germicidal solution that contain 2% or less of glutathione can usually be poured down the drain. Germicidal solutions with greater than 2% may need to be managed as a hazardous waste. You should check with your local authorities on disposal methods for those chemicals. Non-hazard waste management, regular dental office waste should be recycled whenever possible, and that's going to include your just everyday aluminum, glass, newspaper, fiber, office paper, and mixed paper.